Hi, I'm Freddie Bell, and the proposed 0% capital gains rate for 2025 could dramatically affect retirees who rely on investment income. Is that you? Understanding who qualifies, what thresholds apply, and how it impacts Social Security and Medicare is key to preparing for possible changes.
Welcome to Label on Fire with Amazon best-selling author and Yields for You portfolio manager, Label Sternbach. Label on Fire is supported by our ETFs, Yields for You Strategy A and Relative Strength Managed Volatility. Our mission is to help 1 million people retire with financial security. Now, the Financial Independence and Retirement Show dedicated to helping you build the life of your dreams as fast as possible with as little stress as possible. It's Label on Fire.
Label, hello and welcome back.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, and I'm wondering, can you clarify this for me? The 0% capital gains proposal, what does that really mean for retirees?
Yeah, so something that few people talk about and few people even know exists, but there is a 0% tax bracket when it comes to capital gains. The truth is there is a 0% tax bracket for income, but most people are familiar with that, right? You got your standard deduction. What you have with capital gains is taxed at a different tax bracket than your ordinary income. It has its own tax system, so to speak, than your regular 1040 tax return. And that is something that you really need to take advantage of when you're retired. And you really need to try to focus on, is it something that you're going to capitalize on? How are you going to capitalize on it? And there's a few moving pieces. And because there's a few moving pieces, and it's one of those things that's very difficult to properly articulate, it's not something you hear the media talking about. It's not something that most financial advisors talk about because it doesn't make a pithy headline. It doesn't make an easy webinar for me to tell you, I got this amazing product to sell you. No, there's no amazing product to sell you. There's just hard work and putting yourself in the right position to be able to take advantage of it. So with that disclaimer said, let's talk about what that 0% capital gains tax bracket is and kind of what the big beautiful bill, how that impacts it. When we talk about capital gains, we get taxed on it in two ways. There's two things that affect it. So with income, we get taxed by how much money we make. With capital gains, it's a combination of how much money we make plus how much gains have we harvested or have we incurred in our trades. And so we net out our gains and our losses get netted out. Our long-term and our short-term get netted out in a weird order. And then what we're left with gets thrown onto our tax return, and we get taxed sometimes as ordinary, sometimes as capital gains, in which case it goes at a 0, 15, 20% tax rate. And then if we make too much money, we get something called a Medicare surcharge, which is a 3.5% tax on top of that we have to now pay more money on top of it. So when we're talking about investments and we're talking about gains and losses, because that's how you get capital gains. Capital gains are, I bought something and I sold it at a higher price, so I made a profit. And when I make a profit on my trades, then I have to pay taxes on it, right? Because Uncle Sam gets a piece of everything. Right. However, as we talk about a lot on this show, the tax code is specifically designed to move money around our economy, right? And where is the biggest concentration of money that can be moved into our economy that will create economic output, that will hire people and create jobs, create a financial future, right, is the thing that everybody tries to sell products to us for, right, because we have this great economic engine. Well, the center of that economic engine is the stock market, right? It is investing in companies that are trying to build something new and trying to create widgets and whatever it is that other people will buy and spend. When we talk about incentivizing investments, one of the ways that the federal government incentivizes investments is by creating this economic opportunity where you don't have to pay taxes on the growth of those investments. And there's a number of ways that they do that. But two of the easier to access ways are, number one, if you earn below a threshold, and depending on whether you're single or married, it's a different threshold. But if you're married, it's about $44,000. So if your taxable income is under $44,000, then you do not pay any gains on your capital gains. Right. So for those years where you're under $44,000, approximately $44,000, it's adjusted for inflation, you will pay 0% on those gains. So you can have up to $44,000 of gains, right? Plus your $30,000 of standard deduction, or $33,000, right, of standard deduction of capital gains, and you don't pay anything in tax, which is awesome, right? However, right, it is something that you got to make sure to manage, right? Because it's based on your income.
Man, so the thresholds are 44 and under. So what's the other way? What happens after you go over $44,000?
I'm going to preface this by saying, right, these brackets adjust every single year with inflation. Mm-hmm. So for 2025, the brackets are for single filers, $48,350. For married, it's $96,700 for the long-term capital gains. And then it increases. The next bracket goes up to $533,000 for single filers and $600,000 for joint. And that is different than it was before, right? Before it was a much smaller number for the 0% tax bracket. So we get a temporary bump up. It does eventually come back down. But that is part of the great, big, beautiful bill, is that it made that 0% tax bracket a little more accessible for a short period of time. So you need to, again, tax planning opportunities for 2025, where if you've got gains, you want to try to take advantage of them. But in general, you want to take advantage of them. And you want to harvest losses, because that's another way to get into that 0% tax bracket, right? Is if you've got losses, they will offset your gains, right? So you can create your own 0% tax bracket, or you can stretch out that 0% for further.
Can you talk further about who's going to qualify and who would even be interested in the 0% tax gains?
Yeah, so anyone who has investable assets that are not in a retirement account. Mm-hmm. So if you have investments and they are not held inside a retirement account, so either a traditional IRA or a 401k or a Roth, then you are somebody who this should perk up your ears, because you are paying taxes on every penny that you earn in there. So if you have money that is invested, in a mutual fund inside of your brokerage account, right, or your Vanguard account, or wherever that is, that mutual fund sends you a 1099, and on that 1099, there's going to be capital gains and there's going to be ordinary income. So one thing you will definitely want to do is get rid of that mutual fund and convert it to an ETF if you can, because ETFs don't throw off 1099s. You just have capital gains when you sell it. So when you go to sell that thing, you are going to have to pay taxes on that growth. And that is something that you want to avoid at all costs, because we don't like paying taxes.
That's right. So that gives us a picture of who qualifies. And I'm wondering, can you tell us if it affects Social Security just celebrating its 90th year? Does it affect that taxation and Medicare premiums as well?
It does. So Social Security, Social Security is very interesting. So Social Security gets taxed into two brackets. So just like we talked about, income tax has its own tax brackets, investment income has its own tax brackets. Well, Social Security has got its own tax brackets. And Social Security tax brackets go into 50% and 85%. If you earn, if your Social Security payments plus your interest payments plus your investment gains and some other stuff get thrown in there, even though you may not pay taxes on those, but those gains, if you have gains that go into those buckets, that will move you, those get added up together. And if they are greater than the threshold, which is, I think is like 22 to 30 something thousand, you can look it up. It's constantly changing, but you Google it on Social Security Administration's website, and what that will push you up from the 50% bracket to the 85% bracket. And what that means is 50% of your Social Security income gets taxed, or 85% of your Social Security income gets taxed, and that gets added back in on your tax return as taxable income. Although you may be in the 0% tax bracket for capital gains, you do want to question whether that's going to cause you to pay more taxes on your Social Security. So that is definitely a consideration. What I will also say is a consideration when it comes to this is you really got to ask yourself the question, right, of what is going to save you more in taxes, paying that taxes on and being the 0% tax bracket for capital gains, or Social Security, right? Having 15% more, 35% more of your Social Security getting taxable. Will that actually move the needle on how much taxes you're paying? Because that also goes back to, while it gets added into your tax return, depending on your standard deductions, depending on what exclusions you have, that may reduce how much taxes you actually pay. So again, we get into this calculus game, which will net you more in tax savings, right? Harvesting capital gains or controlling your taxable income, right? And often it's a combination of the two. What I'll also throw in there, another monkey to throw in there, another wrench to throw into the gears, is if you harvest enough losses, so forget about gains for a second, if you harvest enough losses, you can offset up to $3,000 of ordinary income on your tax return. Right. So not only forget about Social Security, but it can also reduce your ordinary income tax on your tax return. So again, capital gains harvesting, we've got podcasts on it. We've got resources on the website. I talk about it quite a bit. These go into those tax strategies that you really got to consider when you're thinking about how do I pay the least amount of taxes possible.
As mentioned, there's information at yields4u.com. That's yields, the number 4, the letter u.com. We just have a few minutes left, but can you tell us about the impact on the Medicare premiums and what steps retirees should be taking right now to prepare should it become law?
Yeah, so the Medicare premiums and Medicare surcharges, so those are based on the last 2 years of your income. But again, it's a modified adjusted gross income. It uses its own formula for what gets counted in there. And it uses a different set of brackets, again, than anything else on your tax return. So some people like to control their taxable income. And if you're close to the bracket, then you definitely should control it so that you stay under the bracket so you don't have to pay IRMA and those Medicare surcharges. But that is something, again, one of those considerations that come into play of how much money you're paying in total outflows, right? You are the CFO for your household. And so you need to look at all the money that's coming in and all the money that's going out and figure out, what is going to net me the most amount of money in my pocket for this quarter, for this year, right? Short-term planning. But then you got to do long-term planning. What's going to net me the most amount of money over the long run? What will give me the greatest financial security in the long run? And what is the thing that is then, beyond my life, right? For my spouse, my loved ones, and the people who I care about the most, right? What is going to get them, have the biggest impact on them? And that's really what all these decisions come down to. In terms of, things potentially coming into law, it's, I really don't like preempting things unless there's a certainty that they're going to get passed, because politicians love talking, right? That their job is to talk and their job is to get reelected, right? And oftentimes it's not about the things that they actually pass, but the things that get the most airtime. And so when you look at what actually gets passed versus what gets talked about, a lot more gets talked about than what actually gets passed. And when it gets passed, it's never what anyone thought it was going to be. A few of the politicians even read the bills that get passed. So,
what an indictment.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see what actually happens and where the dice fall out. And you got to also look at, like, okay, even when things get passed, what gets implemented, right? Because remember, you got these agencies with, tens of thousands of employees, ancient systems. For them to make any kind of change is not easy. And they may decide to implement the law very differently than what was intended. And it happens frequently, to the point that there are usually major lawsuits over any kind of major regulation because they implement it differently than Congress intended. And then people want to litigate it.
That's labeled Sternbach, and we've been talking about 0% capital gains. And from the conversation, I hope you've realized that 0% capital gains proposals could save retirees a significant amount of money, but only if they qualify and if you plan carefully. So understanding the thresholds and ripple effects on Social Security and Medicare is absolutely crucial. Careful preparation now can help you, the retirees, make the most of potential changes. And again, you can find all of this information at yields4u.com. He's Label Sternbach. I'm Freddie Bell, and this is Label on Fire.
If you would like to see how the Yields for You team can help you get off the Wall Street roller coaster and save you money on taxes so you can live the life of your dreams, book an appointment online at yields4u.com or call 410-914-4894.
Yields for You is a registered investment advisor in the state of New York and only transacts business in states where the firm is properly registered or is excluded or exempted from registration requirements. Registration as an investment advisor is not an endorsement. Information presented on this program is believed to be factual and up to date, but we do not guarantee its accuracy, and it should not be regarded as a complete analysis of the subjects discussed. Discussion should not be construed as an offer to buy or sell or solicitation of any offer to buy or sell the investments mentioned. Annuity guarantees are subject to the claims paying ability of the issuing insurance company. Content should not be viewed as legal or tax advice. Always consult an attorney or tax professional regarding your specific legal or tax situation.